So yeah, on to third-party apps now. So third-party apps, these are applications which sit outside Google Workspace, which users might be using all Google accounts to sign into. So any app which users are using the sign in with Google button to access, whether that's a web app, Android app, iOS app, that's classed as a third-party app on Google. And you can see all of these. If we go into security, access and data control, and API control, and we can see what apps our users are using by going into manage third-party app access. This screen will show us any configured apps. I'll go into that in a minute, but let's just have a look at what has been accessed by our users on our domain. So here it's given me a list sorted by the most users of what users are signing into with their Google account. And some things worth noting on here. So on the first column, we've got the app name. Then we've got the type of app, so whether it's a web app, Android app, or iOS app. We've got its ID, the number of users, but also helpfully, and this is key, the services that app is accessing. So some apps might just be using Google sign-in. So for instance, this app at the top here, just using Google sign-in for authentication purposes, but it's not accessing any other data. Whereas some of these apps, let's take Canva, is also asking access to the Drive API. And what's helpful in this interface is if we click into Canva and click into Drive, it actually shows what access has been granted for Canva. So in Canva's instance, it can see, edit, create, and delete only specified files in Google Drive. And it can also see and download all of your Google Drive files. Fine, in Canva's case, Canva is a great app, well-regarded app, and an app Google have verified, so that's fine. But there might be apps which you don't want to enable users to give away Drive access to or Gmail access to. So let's have a look through here, see if we can spot anything interesting with Drive access. Actually, what we can do is if we apply a filter and just select requested services, Drive, for instance, this will just show us all the apps using Drive. And okay, I don't know what this service is, but let's have a look. Workspace Builder. This isn't a verified app by Google, so Google haven't verified this app's security policy or looked at it, and it does have access to Drive items, so it can see, edit, create, and delete all of your Google Drive items. And this is being used by 9 users. Looks like it's an internal app actually on this domain, but if that was an external app, I might be a bit more concerned about that. So what I would recommend doing now, if we go back up a bit, back up to API controls. Now let's explore this and make some recommendations for you on what you can do to better control your third-party apps on your domain. This is always one of the key areas we look at when we do security audits. So the first thing I'd look at on here is just your overall domain settings. So if we go into settings, what I'd recommend checking on your domain is how you've got it configured for unconfigured third-party apps, okay? And these are apps you've not already trusted or configured on your domain. So by default, anyone over 18 can access any third-party app and share their account data, their Gmail and Drive data with that app. The default for under 18s is they can't access any app unless you've already trusted that app. Okay, they do have some other options here as well. So you can actually customize this by OU now. It used to be a domain-wide setting, but now if there is a certain group of users, say maybe you've got some service accounts or parental accounts on your domain, but don't need any third-party app access, so you could turn that off for those users. Likewise, maybe students, you do want to let students sign in using a Google account to an app. You could allow that here, but they wouldn't be able to access their Drive or Gmail from the app. So you can control that all from your settings page. Now if we back up to here, so go back into API controls, the other key thing I want to show here. So remember a moment ago, we were looking at what apps had access to a user's Drive or a user's Gmail account. You can control that at a high level on your Workspace domain. And you can do that via this option. So I'll just show you how it is again. If we go into API controls and then manage Google services, by default, all of these services are unrestricted, which means a user can give that app access to their Drive, Gmail, calendar, tasks, classroom, and so on. What I recommend doing is restricting access to Drive and Gmail to only trusted apps. So as you can see on this domain, we changed Drive to be restricted. And we can do that just by selecting change access and setting it to restricted in here. After we've changed that, that means that any app we've not already trusted won't be able to use Google Drive. So you want to do a bit of work beforehand just to make sure that any apps which are needed for learning and teaching, which you want users to continue to use, they do need to be trusted in advance. Otherwise, as soon as you change this, they will be cut off. So do check that first. But the important thing here is really just it helps protect any sensitive data you've got in Drive and Gmail and ensures that only those apps you really want to trust actually do have access. Because I've seen instances in the past where, yeah, some new kind of spurious, untrustworthy AI tools have been used by teachers, for instance. They've given access to their Drive, and when you look into the terms and conditions in these tools, what they can do with your Drive files is actually very open and something I don't think any school would want to have their teachers using. So it is really worthwhile just having an understanding and auditing what you've got being used on your domain. So when it comes to auditing your apps more closely, we get a high-level view here of how many users are using apps with Drive or Gmail in, but we can get some more details about this. If we go back into Accessed Apps and go into View List, and from here, we can either just filter this view, or we can actually download a list into Google Sheets. This is something I recommend doing. The advantage of putting it into Sheets is you can then use Sheets filters to filter that information. But what's really helpful is if we bring this into Sheets, okay, and let's we've got a list here of apps we've configured previously. So let's exclude those from our view. So we're just interested in the unconfigured apps and the ones which haven't been trusted already. So that will shorten the list greatly. And generally, when I look at these lists, I tend to ignore anything with less than 5 users because it contains a lot of historic information in here. So it could be those apps aren't actually used anymore. So if you've got a really big list, I'd prioritize anything with greater than 5 users. But that will help shorten it. But in here, in Sheets, we can also filter by what services are being used. So we can use a filter there. We can see the requested APIs as well. But what's really useful is you can go through and mark in Sheets any apps which you want to be trusted. So what I would tend to do is set up a data validation field in Sheets and have a drop down next to each app for trusted, limited, or blocked. And then I can adjust this information in Sheets and then do a bulk import afterwards and upload this into Google, into the admin console. That's one way of updating it in bulk. Of course, as I'm sure many of you know already, you can update it individually as well. So for this app, for instance, if I wanted to change this access, I could go over here, select change access, and I can either apply this to the entire domain or just change access for particular OUs. Let's do it for the whole domain. And just as I described earlier, we've got 3 different access levels. So we can either set it to trusted, in which case it can access Google sign-in, it can access all those restricted services. So on this domain with restricted Drive and Gmail, it would be able to access those services. So it's got full access, it's fully trusted. Limited means it can only access the unrestricted data. So if you remember on that screen we looked at earlier, where Drive and Gmail were restricted, but the other services were still unrestricted. That means a limited app could access those unrestricted services, but not our restricted services. A new option, which has just been introduced, is you also now have the ability to control by each individual app what services you want to allow for that particular app. So if we click onto here, we can actually add or remove different access based on each individual app. So if there is an app you wanted to be very precise about what APIs it could access on behalf of that user, then you could customize that here. Or our last option is blocked, and of course that would just fully block that app for the selected users. Cool. And once we've configured those, we can see all of our configured apps from here on our configured apps list. And again, you can also download this list. You get a slightly different export of this information from here. Okay, and if apps are blocked and unavailable to users, students currently, not staff yet, but soon, I hope, students can request an app be made available to them. If you do get those requests, they appear here in the apps pending review. You can also track those requests and track general app usage using the security investigation tool. So this is really useful to know about actually. So if we go into the investigation tool, and the log file you want to select is OAuth log events, and this shows us all app usage, all third-party app usage on a domain, what APIs are getting called, what apps are being trusted or denied. So if we go into OAuth log, and if I just hit search first of all, you can see the type of data which will appear for our users. So it shows the types of tools being used by users on this domain, the type of events. So all of these are API calls. We can filter by other events as well. So if we bring up the event attribute, we can look at API calls, deny requests, grants, requests. So I mentioned students can request apps. These will get logged as a request here. So if you wanted to, you could use the investigation tool to set up an automated alert about any requests that actually have any on this domain. But if I did, I'd see those here. And you could create an activity rule and then get an email alert when there is a request from a student. But I find this log file really useful, particularly if, let's say we found an app on our accessed apps list on this Google Sheet. You know, it's good. It tells us what apps are being used, how many people, but it doesn't actually tell us who's using that app. So if there's an app I wanted to find out more information about, like let's take Moat, for example. If I wanted to find out who's using Moat on this domain, then I could add a condition. I could search by its application name or ID, hit search, and then it will show me the users who are making use of that app. Okay, didn't help there because I had it converted it to a URL. Let's try that again. And hopefully it should show the users using the app. So yeah, now we can see who's using this app on our domain. And another useful feature in the investigation tool, just to highlight, is you can also group your results by user as well. And then that just gives you a really quick overview of who's using that app the most. So yeah, that is the OAuth log events in the investigation tool and API controls. So I think I've just about covered everything there. One other thing quickly to mention is, which I didn't mention earlier, from the settings page, a couple of useful things to look at here is you can customize the message users get about accessing a blocked app. So you could have a custom message here about contacting the help desk, or the best place to go to request access to that app. And you can also control whether you do want under 18s to be able to request unconfigured third-party apps or not. I do hear this is being opened up to all users in the future, which would be good for staff, but at the moment it is just under 18s only. So yeah, that is managing third-party apps on Google Workspace. Something I highly recommend doing. It's something we always do a deep dive into on our security audits, just because it does uncontrolled third-party app usage does leave you quite open to potentially leaking data and unauthorized use. So it's good to have visibility of this and control access to your sensitive data.